lectures, part of the citywide celebration of Providence's 375th anniversary. And I think we're really fortunate that we've got 2 of the 4 lectures that we're doing for that celebration dealing with printing in Providence. I think printing and the book trade is really important to any city's development, so I'm really glad we had the chance to sort of bring that into the discussion of Providence's earliest days. Before Phoebe comes up, I just wanted to give a few sort of notes, kind of the appetizer before the full main course of Providence book history. So this is not only a celebration of, or a lecture on Providence's early book history, it's also the opening for our most recent exhibition, which is Out of the Cases. If you haven't gotten a chance to take a look at it yet, please get a chance to look at it after the talks or come back some other time. I wanted to just kind of put together 5 little pieces of information that didn't make it into the exhibition itself. Part of the fun of doing these kind of exhibitions is you get to pull materials out from all over the place, you get to look at things you haven't looked at before, and I thought this would be a good chance to kind of mention a few. So no connection between any of this stuff, no real organization, just kind of 5 things that I think are interesting. Kind of fill a couple rules. First of all, it's one of the locations that the Shakespeare's Head was located at. William Goddard, Providence's first printer, who I think Phoebe's going to tell us all about in great detail. This is one of the locations he located his print shop at.
Where was it? Where is it?
Oh, actually, it's Market Square. It's on Main Street, or Main Street College. It would have been there. It's not actually there. You're probably wondering, I don't think I've seen that historic building. This photograph was taken around sometime before 1860, and I think that's about when they tore it down. You'll actually see some more evidence about that. But yes, it was a pretty well-known landmark. William Goddard was there. So William Goddard was printing on the first floor. It was known at that time as Judge Jenks' house. Because Judge Daniel Jenks basically bought the distillery and turned it into a set of shops. And so on the second floor, his, I think, nephew or son, Daniel Jenks, had a business selling books. Printer on the first floor, bookseller on the second. And then later on, in the early 19th century, this is one of the places that John Carter ended up printing. Another big important Providence printer. You're probably familiar with them. If not, again, Phoebe will give lots of information. One of the things I love about this image, though, is you take a look, pretty much every available space has been plastered with some kind of sign. So I figured this would be a chance to get a close-up of those signs. If you can't see them in the case, you can at least see them now. So yeah, the cheapest clothing house in Providence. I'm sold. Try Clark's Compound Visceral Lotion. And I think these are fascinating. You can't really read it very well, but it says clothing at panic prices. And I really wish that phrase could somehow come back. I wish we could, you're driving down the road, there's a billboard, and it's panic prices. I don't know what that means. You panic because you're afraid you're going to miss them.
You haven't lived through the last 2 years.
Everything is panic pricing, yeah. Here is positive fact, this entire stock to be sold regardless. Punctuation not necessary there, just panic. And here you can see why the panic and why everything must be sold. Building coming down, this stock must be sold. So, presumably about that time, it was coming down, it was advertised. That's just a portion of our collection is, and you'll see it on the labels out there, taken from the Daniel Berkeley Updike collection, and this is one of those items. Updike was a pretty well-known printer. He operated Marymount Press in Boston, and he was largely responsible for a collection of books that we've got here. And I wanted to have a couple sections of the exhibition just kind of showing the conditions of printers in the 18th century. So not necessarily Providence. And in this case, the book's actually German, so it's not really Providence specific. But this one I thought was fun. I wanted to put it in for a lot of reasons, not least is this image of the guy smoking his pipe. correcting copy text. His right hand while smoking with his left. If you look closely at this image, you'll see some evidence of that Daniel Berkeley uptake influence. In 1910, the St. Bride Library in London had a sale of their duplicates, and Berkeley was inspirational sort of in bringing it to the library's attention and also providing money to get those books. And they're a big portion of our books on the history of printing here. So this stamp is at the bottom right-hand corner of that title page. And you can see that it says the William Blades Library. Blades was a printer and historian of Caxton, sort of a really big, interesting figure. And St. Bride still has the William Blades Library in London. They advertise it on the website, where they've got Blades' books there in a cabinet. His books, presumably, except for this one, because it's here in Providence, which is kind of an interesting item for them to sell. Here's just a peek inside, since you can only really see one set of pages in the exhibition. Part of the book is about correcting. So if you're familiar with sort of if you had papers returned to you with red letter corrections all over it, here's an example of that in print. It's kind of interesting two-color printing example. And it has my favorite thing, this poem, which, as I understand it, it's in German, my German's not great. As I understand it, is a poem in honor of printers. I thought you would love to hear me butcher in German the first couple lines. The title, first of all, is Ehrengedichte der edlen Druckerinnen, which roughly, I guess, translates as an honor poem about the noble printers. First of all, I just love the idea that there is this poem out there. Presumably it's, and Gutenberg rose and built the press, that kind of thing. First couple lines, just to give you a taste. Der edle Greif bin ich genannt, nicht jedermann aufs Best bekannt, weil man von mir so viel gedickt, was mancher man noch auf der nicht. If anybody actually speaks German, I apologize for that. But you can see that it's rhyming couplets, and it sounds like a lot of fun. I love the translation. I got somebody who knows German a little bit better, and she says it translates roughly as, I contemplated the noble griffin that no man knows better, because men might, like me, write lots of poems that other men don't notice. So that's the beginning of this poem. If any of you are German scholars who want to come in and translate the rest, I'd be absolutely thrilled. Random factoid number 4. You'll notice in the exhibition of the document on the right, which is Providence printing of the Treaty of Paris. Not only was it the site of Providence's first library, so in the 1750s, the Providence Library started out with Providence's first library. They moved into the courthouse burned down, they built the courthouse, they moved to that courthouse, and eventually moved out and joined up to form the Providence Library. But here's another way in which the old State House was a site for book buying. This is from a 1773 Providence Gazette. And it's a notice from the sheriff saying that on the 3rd of September at the courthouse, there'll be a sale of an assortment of new books, newly bound, imported from London, history, law, physics, divinity, mathematics, etc., and some clothes. They'll be sold to satisfy a judgment of the court, so somebody didn't pay their bills, got the books taken. And the sheriff has catalogs at his house. You can come to his house to look at catalogs, or books are for sale. So everybody was involved in book trade at this time, even the sheriff, even the local buyers.
Thank you to the Providence Public Library for having me tonight. Hopefully you're interested in printing and figuring. Because we get really into it. Really into the meat. So, does anyone recognize the symbol here on the slide, just for kicks?
And
Well, this is the first marking of an arrow in the Providence town papers, 1647. So it's the first time that the anchor is associated with Rhode Island. And that was during the time when Roger Williams was doing most of the clerk work in the papers. Okay, so.
You call it arrow.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You call it.
I'm sorry. So we're going to start out with Roger Williams. This is a pretty famous painting of the 1850s, but it shows Roger during his banishment, which actually wasn't that long. But he was a very educated man. He attended Cambridge University. He was there with John Milton and continued a correspondence with him throughout his life. He studied with John Milton. He studied all the classic texts. There were classic languages, as they were considered at the time. He would read Latin, French, Dutch, and he writes his letters about teaching his 3 sons in these languages. And this is important because it shows that he was he was reading religious texts in their original tongue. And this is how he discussed it with other intellectuals of his time. He arrives in Boston in February, not a great time to be in Boston, in 1631. And as soon as he gets there, he refuses to join the congregation. And at meantime, Salem invites him to come up there and join the church in Salem. But before he leaves, the Boston elders tell him to keep a lid on it. Don't influence other people, don't make a problem. So, of course, this didn't last too long. And in January of 1636, well, he had to get a reprieve once, but he gets a notice that he's spreading new and dangerous opinions. And so they go up together, and he's going to be deported back to England. And they show up, and he's been gone for 3 days, so someone took him off. And he comes down, and he comes to Seacon. He gets here in the summer of 1636. So he did walk, but his banishment was only from January to the summer. So, it took him a couple of months. It wasn't I guess it was probably 40 days in the wilderness, but not much more. And the thing I'm trying to set up here is to talk that he was not walking into a stale ground. There was a lively intellectual connection with London between 1630 and 1645 when he arrived. Over 100 university men arrived in the Massachusetts colony. And half of them had advanced degrees or were fellows from major universities in England. And the only exception really was Plymouth, because they were mostly farmers. And in the warrant for his deportation, they specifically said that he had drawn about 20 persons to his opinions, and they were intending to erect a plantation about Narragansett Bay, from whence these infections would easily spread into the district. That's what Governor Wood does. And I noticed in many of these early pictures, he is carrying a book. You would presume this would be Bible, but and another one carrying a book. Which sort of tries to imply that he was propagating the gospel to the Native Americans, which was not the case at all. In fact, that he felt there were some theories at that time that the Indians, the Native Americans in this country were the lost tribe of Israel. So that's why he worked to learn their language, understand their ideas, wanting to communicate, but not having the idea that he would need to convert them to the And here, of course, it looks like, they're helping him when they're probably just saying, like, why don't you get out of here? So his first book he ever published, groundbreaking work on North American Indian language. It's printed in London in 1643, very proudly by Gregory Dexter. Gregory Dexter eventually immigrates to Providence sometime before 1644 when he builds a house on the northernmost lot, so north of where the Roger Williams Memorial Park is now. He's the first printer to come to Providence, and he never prints something. He becomes the town clerk, but he does not become a printer. And the press existed here in Massachusetts. It was set up, the press in Cambridge was set up in 1638, but it was controlled by the religious authorities there. And therefore, you could not print anything that you wanted. You needed them to prove it, but also that if you wanted to be on the international stage, you really needed to be printing out of London, kind of like New York was. That's so cool. And Roger Williams went. He lived in England from 1651 to 54, and the 1640s were a time of very lax censorship because the presses were really growing and the imprints were growing in London, but they were the government didn't know what to do with it. So during this period of lax censorship, our friend Roger publishes Bloody Tenant, printed with no imprint on it and with no printer's name. I suspect it was Gregory Dexter. Same year he left town and came to Providence, so he went and printed this and then took off. It was ordered, banned and burned, double whammy. But we have to assume that Roger Williams probably carried copies back with him when he came for us, or stashed them there. And one of his main rivals, the Bloody Tenant, while not in the way that we think of it, was talking about religious freedom, and that if you gave people religious freedom, that they would naturally come back to the correct faith. But his main rival, even when he had been up in Boston, was Cotton Mather, who really didn't believe this. He thought that complete religious liberty was very dangerous. And so he publishes The Bloody Tenant Watch and Made Way in the Blood of the Lamb. Again in London, 1647. You can see this as a reply to Mr. Williams' letter. And consider that these guys lived about 50 miles from each other. They were sending texts to London to get printed, and then waiting to read them when they came back and to get insulted, and then write another text to send over London. But there was also, in a lot of the letters, there's a lot of literary terms. Mather especially liked to refer to Williams' Quixotism, and may have actually been the person who quote that term. After this slap in the face, he comes back with The Bloody Tenant, yet more bloody. By Roger Williams of Providence in England, which has a printer's name, it's sort of an ongoing problem. And he's rebutting the charge that society would collapse if religious freedom were extended. So this is going on, and obviously the authorities start picking up on it. And so by 1650, 1652, Roger is living over in London doing his business, and he writes a letter back to Gregory Dexter, who's now in Providence. And difficult to see, but you may be able to say, to my dear and faithful friend, Gregory Dexter, at Providence, at New England. And he's writing from England, he's writing from Whitehall. So he's at the university. And he's complaining about how they're starting to censor the press. And he says in this letter, in this bottom part, which I know is difficult to read, at this present, the devil rageth in clamors and catacons and remonstrances from the stationers and others to the Parliament, and all cry, shut up the press. So, this is the first time, shut up the press. And soon after, 1653, the next year, England passed the Act against unlicensed and scandalous books. So the first law regulating printing and controversial literature. So that's the sort of the first part of the story, and to set up the kind of atmosphere that Providence was founded on. We did not have a printer for almost 100 years. We did not have paper makers. We did not have much of anything, but we did have booksellers. There's a footnote, which I'm hoping to track down, something like that there is a book at Harvard that has a note that says there were 4 booksellers in Rhode Island in 1732, 2 of which were at Providence. So people were definitely buying books, they were trading books, they were swapping books. We had several large libraries. Ludwig Updike, who is the ancestor of Dan Berkeley, and several others. So we're going to jump a bit and talk about when New England gets their printers. As I mentioned before, first in Cambridge is 1638. That's the first in New England. Printing starts a little earlier in Virginia. First in Rhode Island is Newport, and James Franklin, the elder brother of Benjamin. That's a great story for another time. But the difference you can see is almost 50 years, 40 years before the press gets to Providence, that before Newport was occupied by the British, which was between 1776 and 1779, Newport, the population was much larger than Providence. The trade and economic importance was a lot stronger. So there wasn't a lot of pressure for our own press. And this is an early flatbed press that would have been used. They could usually disassemble. They weren't as heavy as we consider them today. And so our first printer is William Goddard. This is an image of the broadside that Jordan was discussing. And he issues this broadside before he launches the paper to say that he wants to start a newspaper. And I have a couple copies of this if anyone wants to read. The basics. But he's looking for support. He's looking to get the town behind him and get support for the printing enterprise. He was born in New London. He's the son of the postmaster there and his wife, Sarah Updike, daughter of Lockwood. So Sarah, his mother, and when we're going to see Sarah Goddard here or Sarah Goddard up there, it's Sarah Updike Goddard. So she is actually a Rhode Island roots person. He sent Isaiah Thomas a letter that says that the first imprints were a broadside that announced the capture of Morro Castle in Havana, and a playbill, the first ever play that was performed in New England. Neither of the examples survived. But the play so enraged the town that it was blamed for the drought and the poor people. What was the name of the play? We know who wrote it, we don't know who. Yeah, so just go over to that. does say that much company from Boston attended the theater and were highly gratified. The theatrical campaign was short, party politics occasioned the suppression of plays. And that goes on for a while, but that's another day. So Goddard comes in, he publishes the first almanac set to the meridian of Providence, which is sort of a important moment for any town in the colonies. So you didn't have to get the almanac to the meridian in Boston and then count afterwards, or you know what the tides were specifically here. And these were originally written by Benjamin West, whose name comes up over and over again, who was not a printer, but he was a scientist and a bookseller. And you can see here that printed, but he's not stating the location until you got it. He starts the Providence Gazette, and he paints high. This is somewhat interesting. This is the first issue on the back page. He decided to publish a genealogical table of the House of Russia, in case anyone didn't know. And I can guarantee in Providence in 1762, not many people knew or cared. But it is a great, I mean, as far as like the typesetting example, it's brilliant, but I feel like the message is probably pretty lost. Something that the paper did and has continued through its history, that he could advertise when he was publishing a book. So here's for the Divine Right of Baptism, a book by who was the president of the College of New Jersey. I'm not sure if it's Princeton or University of New Jersey. And then at the Historical Society, we have this speaking description that says, Thomas limited his book, bought of Mr. William Goddard, price 9 pence, lawful money. In case they thought he might have stolen it. It's definitely this. So that's on the verso. That shows that he was buying directly from Goddard and not necessarily from the bookseller. But also you can see right here, they're interesting using the ties and also when the moon phases are coming in. And you know, at the sign of the moon, he makes moves. This is another example of an advertisement and print that Goddard did. Here now he's at Shakespeare's Head and using that sign name. And anyone not familiar with the sign names, there's sort of like pubs in England where it'll be like the ox and the anvil or something like that. Not necessarily related to what they do, but always entertaining. And you can see here, very simple. Very simple newspaper, like not getting a lot of, not being very flashy, just his name, just a line. So I think he was a little subtle in his promotion. And here we have what I consider a hilarious letter. It's a partial letter that we purchased in the 40s of the Society of Goddard, writing to his friend Josias Linden, complaining about how terrible Providence is for printing and making books. And just up here at the top, I know it's a little hard, to exert myself for my own interest without regarding the effect it may have upon his or that of any other, the printer at Newport having the preference, and the great advantage of me lays me under an absolute necessity to lower the prices of printing the act. Otherwise, I can have no pretensions to the business. At the same time, I must declare that what is now given is much less than will be charged in many other parts of America. And at this time, because Newport's been established for so long, he's actually competing about, I guess, Anne Franklin, the widow of James Franklin. But she did. She had all the government contracts, and you can go to the archives and see the letters. She usually would go in and refer to her four starving children while she was negotiating the contract as well. So it was really, it's hard to compete with. But he's not all grouch. He does publish some satire. This is some of the earliest Rhode Island satire. This is called The Fall of Samuel the Squantumite and the Overthrow of the Sons of Eden. And it's about pumpkinites, and it says it's published at Copeland, which is the Newport backwards. And you can see here Memorial to the rest of the pumpkinites. Originally, with the Newport Big Public, it was originally published down in Newport, but this imprint uses Goddard's fonts and his ornaments, so you can tell that he is. And it's about the controversy between Stephen Hopkins and Samuel Ward. Obviously, neither of them were very happy about it. But I also have a copy of this. So here in the newspaper, there starts to be some transformation. Here you can see Goddard starts spicing up his masthead, it's a mast bottom for the masthead, and advertising what he's doing, what he's selling, getting a little more flashy. And then he leaves and goes first to New York, then goes to Philadelphia, where he publishes for many years. And so Sarah, his mother, Sarah Updike, starts running the paper, which is a very common thing. But then I think he saw a copy of the paper because even though he's not in town, she starts publishing this. In the absence of William Goddard, like he didn't like her taking his name off. But she was putting her own name, and then she started putting his name back, but saying he's not here doing anything. But you can see the dates. He does eventually return in 1792, and he farmed, he served in the legislature, and then he died here, so he wasn't completely bitter about us. But one of the people that Sarah takes in and company is a young printer who is John Carter, and that's would be a familiar name. Born in Philadelphia, he apprenticed with Benjamin Franklin, so he's very classically trained. And he becomes a business partner with Sarah, and then takes over the full ownership. And he also marries into the Providence family. Amy Crawford, who was Captain Jonathan Crawford's daughter. He always looks such a nice guy in this picture. He works with her and also the daughter, but then they dissolve for some reason, it doesn't work out. They dissolve the partnership. He takes it over. And so, pull over in 1768. So this is the end of 1768 when he becomes full owner. And he runs this advertisement on the left twice, once on the first page and once on the fourth page, saying that the partnership has dissolved, and she's leaving the colony, and if you have any debts over any money, bring it around, and that all the business, that he's going to take it over. And he says, the unpromising prospect this office continued to present for a short time after his connection with Mrs. Goddard was extremely discouraging, which induced him to believe that the attempt was rather made here at too early an age. So he's explaining about how Goddard complained about the printing enterprise here, but he's also, of course, saying, I know how to make it work. And then this is very odd. They don't usually do a sort of like inward bound, outward bound, but the second time he runs it, on the back page, first he talks about how a distillery burned down. And then he says, and this gentleman. And then says, Wednesday last, Captain Joseph Tillinghast sailed for New York, with whom went as passenger Miss Mary Catherine Goddard. So he basically advertises that they left town, which is kind of weird. And also the fact that Miss Mary Catherine Goddard, who goes on to be a printer in Baltimore and does one of the declarations, that she's traveling unaccompanied on a boat. So it's a little insulting. You know, in the 18th century. But he takes the reins, starts doing some really interesting printing. Here we have an ad for the account of Venus. In 1769, Venus moved in front of the sun in Providence, and it's the transit of Venus. That's what Transit Street is named after. Benjamin West, our local scientist and almanac writer, wrote this book for Carter, and he's also pushing almanacs. Does everyone needs an almanac? And just to show the interest, here we have John Carter also has great records as far as his receipts and his ledgers. So this is his ledger book. It's a collection of Carter Danforth papers of the society. This is Moses Brown's entry. And here you can see 1 dozen transit of Venus. I mean, he was going to like pass them out to his friends. What was he going to do with 12? He was pretty excited about the whole thing. Here's Mr. Baptist's Discourse. That's a book also. And then also for advertising. People would pay them for advertising. And here is a subscription to the Gazette. And here's advertising for Gary. So he was doing a good business. You know, he was publishing local authors on local topics. These ledgers give us great insight into the daily life of the printer. Here he is paying for binding 200 shilling books. So he's paying a bookbinder to work for him. And here he's getting paid to printing the lawful money bills. He's printing currency also. But the General Assembly. And then here he's paying 18 shillings for carting 20 loads of stones in Meeting Street. So he's on Meeting Street and he's at Shakespeare's Head. He's paying people to, fix the road. So got the day by day, plus the printing business. But printing money for the colony is pretty important because he means he's getting that business out of Newport. And Jordan has a great picture from the PPL collections in the exhibit. This is another angle. This is Shakespeare's Head, which we're familiar now as the headquarters of Providence Preservation Society. This was John Updike's house, right here. And then this guy was a mason. That was his little storefront. So this is on Meeting in South Main, where right up from where XO is or was. Another big business for the newspaper was printing ads for runaways. So here we have Gideon Austin paying for advertising for a runaway, and then here's the text. And that could include, this one says, runaway last Sunday, a hired servant man named John Nicholas is about 5'9" high, his hair black straight, and a scar from his forehead and his right eye. It usually had to do with if the hired servant had stolen something, taken something with them. But there are also a lot of runaways, either for slaves, wives, indentured servants. And the last gentleman in our timeline today is John Waterman, who coincided with Carter. He was our big local boy, made good. He was born in Smithfield. And was the great-great-grandson of Roger Williams. He was primarily a seaman, but he then became a textile manufacturer, a paper maker, a chocolate maker, and then a printer. So he came to his late life, and it made him a little more non-conformist, untraditional. His printing his use of type, although his structure was very good, and Jordan selected the good structural ones that looked nice, and I chose the ones that looked crazy and kind of weird. So he had served in the Rhode Island militia under Jonathan Olney and married Olney's daughter. So the paper mill, the chocolate mill, were built on those lands in Olney Mill, because he was married to the daughter. And when he does start printing, he purchases a type from Samuel Nealon in Boston, which is a very important printer in Boston. This was a great coup. All his equipment, all of his type, and brought it to Rhode Island. And in fact, when he died, John Carter and Bennett Wheeler, a future printer, had a long-running feud over who was getting the type and didn't speak for many years. So he does traditional printing, but he also becomes known for children's books, which at that time were cautionary tales. If they weren't grammars, if they weren't school books, they were cautionary tales. So this is the ever-popular Cottage of a Daughter. You see here, Providence printed and sold at the new printing office at the paper mill. So he made the printing office and the paper mill. And he's never listed or credited as an engraver, but most printers do their own engravings. James Franklin, the first printer here, was definitely a skilled engraver, but none of the other ones really. They were mostly binder type. But all of these have this mark, and you can see it larger here, IW. And it's a long-running theory that this stands for John Waterman and that he was doing these engravings also, so for the woodcuts. And it wouldn't be surprising seeing as he had experience as a sailor and would be familiar with those kind of things. So, but he really liked these kids' books. And another page from this that I just couldn't resist. Here, this is still the prodigal daughter. And here's the daughter brushing her hair. And here's the devil coming in. So these were usually in rhyme. There's another famous one called Children in the Woods, where the children go out and they get terrified and someone eats one of them. But so he did these nice ones. And unique to the Providence Printers, especially. But also with the paper mill, he could branch out. So here we have him selling paper to John Carter. So an account of printing paper. He's paying him 30 pounds for printing paper. So he's got the whole package. He's got the paper mill, which is really important on not being reliant on shipments from Boston or from England. And it means now at this point we can print, we can make paper, we can make the whole link, and so we can have a lot more freedom in printing what we want, which really has a big hand in the scandalous material we start printing prior to the Revolutionary War, which gets us in trouble. And about him being creative, this is one of the very few colored ink imprints I've ever seen in Rhode Island. This is the only known copy. We got it pretty late. probably you used using pigments or you used plans. And, but also to go just at our last slide, the more traditional thing, and to just coincidentally everywhere where George went. This was one of Waterman's first imprints. And I think it's an important piece because it shows the printing. He had a partner for a small time with Russell, he's no longer here. At the new printing office, the paper mill, but this was the catalog of the books belonging to Providence Library that survived the fire that George had mentioned. And so the only ones that were saved were the ones that were out with some of the members. So it represents that the town got together, the proprietors at least of the library got together and made lists of everything that survived, and then had it printed. And then this is the collection that goes on to found the Providence Library Company, and the collection that eventually develops into the Providence Cabinet collection. And again, people really wanted to make sure they knew what they found. But I hope this has been a good tour down literary history or printing history in Rhode Island, at least up to 1770. And thank you.
Thanks so much for coming out. I forgot to mention the date of our next lecture, which is August 18th. So please feel free to come back.